Don you now your gay apparel and get ready for day 6 of 25 days of Christmas comics. I am your host, the Dude Without Fear, and I'm excited about today's episode because on today's episode, our comic we will be reading from is Spider-Man Christmas in Dallas. Now, the thing that's super cool about this book is that this was not a comic that you could just go to your local comic book store and purchase. This was actually given away as an advertisement inside of the Dallas Times Herald newspaper, which was one of the major newspaper publications in Dallas, Texas at the time. Why Marvel did this, I do not know. I can't find any information on it, but this was one of many comics that they distributed as an advertisement in that paper. And this comic actually references an earlier comic that Marvel released through the Dallas Times Herald, where Spider-Man met the Dallas Cowboys. There are a lot of these books out there, a lot of different types of them. It's kind of a cool thing. The comic, there's a story in it, and it's a little shorter than your normal story, but the comic is about the same size as a normal comic book, but it's got all of these local ads for all of these businesses around the Dallas area, and it's got some cool Spider-Man Christmas things in here. There's like a word search, and it's just a super cool comic book that I'm extremely glad to have in my collection and extremely glad to know about. And because I know about it and because I know about all these other ones, I'm going to probably try to get some of those too. So enough about that. Let's get into the story. So our story starts out, and the Kingpin is reading the Dallas Times Herald. And the front page story is that millionaire inventor Stanley Mudge is throwing a charity ball to raise money for orphans. While the Kingpin is reading this story, Peter Parker is reading the story published by the Daily Bugle about the same event. And while he's reading it, J. Jonah Jameson comes out and tells Peter that Stanley Mudge has invited Jonah to come attend the event as a special guest, and Jonah is telling Peter that he will be joining him because he wants him to take photos for him. And Peter's not happy about this because he wants to spend his Christmas with his Aunt May. And Jonah, doesn't even acknowledge him. He says, no need to thank me, Peter. Go home, pack your bags. Soon we will be away from that wall-crawling menace Spider-Man. So Peter does go home, and he starts to pack his bags, and, Peter Parker is always he's kind of mopey at times, and he's not happy about the fact that he will not be spending Christmas with his Aunt May, and it's the first Christmas that he's not done that. But he knows that the money that he will make from going on this trip, he'll be able to buy her a Florida vacation. So he's kind of, it sucks that I can't spend the holiday with my Aunt May, but yeah, I will make it up to her with a nice vacation, a nice gift. And then Peter goes through remembering all of the awesome stuff that Aunt May has done for him, and he goes through and it retells his origin story. He's like, a lot of good being Spider-Man does me when I can't even spend Christmas with my Aunt May. And he reluctantly packs his bags and meets Jonah at the airport. And then we wind up in Dallas, where Stanley Mudge, the millionaire inventor, who invented anti-gravity devices, by the way, he meets Jonah and Jonah's family at the airport, and Peter's carrying all the luggage, of course, because Jonah treats him like his personal assistant. When Stanley Mudge sees Peter, he welcomes Peter to Dallas as well, and he says that I'm so glad that you were able to accept our invitation. And Peter's shocked. He's like, "What? I was invited?" He's like, "Of course, didn't Jonah tell you?" And Jonah was like, I wanted to surprise the lad." Jonah didn't want Peter to know that Peter was actually invited. He didn't want Peter to feel as important as Jonah. He says that he's glad that both Jonah and Peter could make it back to Dallas, and he references the last time that they were there when he lost his greatest invention, his anti-gravity device. And so they go back to his ranch where the party is set to happen. Our story takes us to a country road, and there is a car stopped because there is a tree down over the road. And so this man dressed as Santa Claus gets out of the car and is trying to get the tree out of the road, when all of a sudden one of Kingpin's big old ham-sized fists comes down on him and knocks him out. Kingpin just picks up the tree and just tosses it out of the road. And then he puts the Santa in the car and gets in the car himself and looks at his watch and says, "Perfect, I'm right on schedule." Then we go to the ranch where the millionaire guests have started to pour in. And Stanley Mudge says, "Where is the actor the agency hired to play Santa? He's late." And then we get my favorite panel in the whole book. It is Kingpin dressed as Santa Claus. He says, "Have no fear, Mr. Mudge. Santa is here." And then Mr. Mudge comes out on stage with Santa, and he says, "Before Santa starts giving out presents to the orphans who are our special guests here tonight, I'd like to thank everyone who made this all possible." And as he's giving the speech, Peter's spider sense starts going off. And Jonah, whispering to Santa, says, "Better start making with the ho-ho-hos. We're about to bring out the kids." And Kingpin says, "Wrong. This party is ended." And picks up Jonah and says, "The Kingpin is taking over." And one thing that I thought was very odd about this book is that the Kingpin is acting like really old school Spider-Man Kingpin. You know, like the Kingpin that I know and love is the Kingpin after Frank Miller revised the character and made him this, what he's supposed to be, the biggest crime boss in New York City. And he's not one to get his hands dirty with something like this. He hires people to do this for him. He will get his hands dirty when it comes to situations that require his strengths and abilities. But a situation like this is something that he would just normally hire somebody to do. So this is, this comic was published in, I believe, 1983. And that's after Frank Miller's had his run on Daredevil, and he's almost back for his second run on Daredevil at that point. And so I just found it very interesting that the Kingpin was written this particular way. It's just very, very out of character for what the Kingpin had become at that point. Regardless, I still enjoy the story because I enjoy seeing Kingpin dressed as Santa Claus. It amuses me. So while Kingpin's taken over the event, we learn that the caterers are the Kingpin's men. And so they start holding everybody hostage, and Peter's like, I gotta get out of here, I gotta create a diversion. And he uses his camera flash to blind the guy that's trying to take him hostage. And once the guy is blinded, he runs off, and the guy starts to chase him, and he gets ahead of him and runs into this room and changes into Spider-Man super quickly. And he's on the ceiling, and the dude comes in, and Spider-Man drops down on him and takes him out. And then while Kingpin is holding everybody hostage for $10 million apiece, Spider-Man is slowly working his way through the Kingpin's men and taking them out one by one as he can. And so Kingpin's having everybody call in their families to wire the money in to his account, and Spider-Man is taking out Kingpin's thugs, and Spider-Man gets the last two guys. Then he turns the lights off. After he turns the lights off, the Kingpin's like, no, this can't be happening. Not here, not now. And Spider-Man turns on his spider light, and Kingpin's like, oh, that light, it can only mean. And then Spider-Man swoops in and kicks him. He's like, you guessed it, Tubby. Now let's step outside and soak up some serious moonlight. And Jonah's pissed that Spider-Man's here. You know, Jonah's not upset that the Kingpin is freaking holding everybody hostage for $10 million apiece. He's mad that freaking Spider-Man shows up to save the day. And he's like, will I never be free from that masked madman? What delusions this guy's got. So then the police show up, and Spider-Man's kicked Kingpin outside, and they're fighting, and Stanley Mudge runs to grab his anti-gravity device because he sees that Spider-Man's actually kind of struggling fighting the Kingpin, which is a testament to the Kingpin's strength and ability. The Kingpin is a lot of the time overrated in how strong and how capable he is. He's not a big fat guy. He is mostly muscle, and he is a trained fighter, and he incredibly strong. I don't think that he's, as strong as Spider-Man is, but I like that they're giving Kingpin the credit in this book. So Stanley runs to grab his anti-gravity device, and Spider-Man's like, I can't hang on to Kingpin. He's worse than a mechanical bull, and meaner too. And so he, of course, he's like, I'm gonna empty both of my web shooters at him. But of course, in typical Spider-Man fashion, his web shooters are empty. So he goes to replace his web cartridges really quickly, and Stanley Mudge says, hey Kingpin, catch, and throws the anti-gravity device at Kingpin, and Kingpin just out of reflexes catches it, and then Spider-Man webs it to the Kingpin's hands, and then Stanley Mudge turns it on, and then the Kingpin just starts going up in the air. He's off and away, and it says that the high-flying foe tries desperately to free himself, but as strong as he is, Spidey's webs are stronger. And so the police come in and fix everything. They get everybody up and make sure everybody's okay and haul off the bad guys. And while they're doing that, Peter comes back over to the group, and he's no longer dressed as Spider-Man. He's back in his suit, and Jonah and his family are talking to Stanley Mudge, and Stanley Mudge says, "In the midst of all the excitement, I think I've made a startling discovery. I know Spider-Man's secret identity." And he yells, "It's none other than J. Jonah Jameson." And Jonah's like, "What?" And Peter was worried there for a second, but when he said it was Jonah, he's not so worried anymore. And Stanley says, "It's just simple logic. Whenever you're in Dallas, so is Spider-Man. You don't have to be a genius to make the connection. But don't worry, Jonah, your secret is safe with me." And Jonah's just like steaming he's just steaming and stuttering. And his wife says, "This is a first for me. I've never seen Jonah speechless before." And then Stanley gets back on the stage and thanks everybody for staying and understanding, and reintroduces Santa Claus, and this time Jonah's playing Santa. And everybody's clapping and cheering and everything, that the party's still going on, that they can still help out the orphans. And Stanley sees that everybody's having a good time despite what just happened, and he notices that Peter looks bummed out. He's like, "What is wrong with that kid?" So he goes over to him and he's like, what's going on, son? What's the matter?" And he tells him it's just that this is the first Christmas I'm spending away from my Aunt May. And he's like, "I've heard enough. Pack your bags and get out of here." He's like, "What?" He's like, "Go to the airport and you'll find my private jet, and they'll take you home tonight so that you can spend Christmas with your aunt." And he's like, "Wow, thank you so much." And he runs out and wishes Mr. Mudge a Merry Christmas. And so our story has a happy ending. So everything just worked out for Peter, which is kind of not how it usually works for Peter. That's kind of the opposite of the Parker luck. So Peter comes out on top because he put aside his wants and what he wanted to do and how he wanted to spend his Christmas. He put that aside and instead focused on doing what was asked of him and focusing on blessing his Aunt May with this trip. And had he not done that, he probably would have bought Aunt May like some hat or something, or like a new brooch or something like that for her to wear. And her Christmas wouldn't have been any more special than past Christmases with Peter, right? But because Peter put his Aunt May before him, the story never says that Aunt May is just pining to spend Christmas with Peter, which I'm sure that she is. But it's all about, I want to spend Christmas with Aunt May. It's all about Peter's mindset is all about what he wants. But he makes himself do something for Aunt May. And so because he did that, he's able to save the charity event and get the orphans the money, and he's able to get the money to get Aunt May the nice thing, and he can still go spend Christmas with Aunt May, and so he comes out on top. So I think the moral of this story is to not focus on the thing that you want so much, but instead focus on the thing that will allow you to be a blessing to somebody else. So it's a very quick read. It's got some campiness to it. Kingpin's a little out of character, but the lesson that we can learn from the story, I think, earns it a spot in our 25 Days of Christmas Comics. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you will be back with me tomorrow for day 7, the end of the first week of this 25-day event. Thank you all for watching. Good night, and God bless.